Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Money Wisdom Podcast. Today, I'm really very excited because many times you have heard me talk about Ikigai, and I've written about Ikigai, and you have heard me from time to time in my podcast mention about Ikigai. And today, I'm very excited because you're going to meet the real master, because you're going to meet the man that actually taught me everything I know about Ikigai. About 1 year ago, I was looking for an Ikigai program, and then when I Googled, by God's grace and thankfully, I found Nick, because otherwise I would have attended a wrong program about Ikigai, which is the Ikigai that most of you would have know about. So today I have the opportunity to ask Nick, the master coach, the founder, my teacher of Ikigai Tribe, to talk to us about Ikigai. Right, so I'm going to ask him some questions, and he's going to tell us some things that many of us would not have heard about. You are really going to hear from the horse's mouth why what you know about the Ikigai, the Four-Circle Venn Diagram, is not the correct Japanese concept of Ikigai. So, Nick, very warm welcome. I know you are sitting in Melbourne right now, summertime right now in Australia.
That's right, Chris. So first of all, thank you for having me on, and also congratulations on all your success with Ikigai. So it's good to see you again.
Thank you, thank you. Yeah, perhaps just as a start, you can share with all our listeners here a bit about yourself. I mean, most people would think that, the master coach of Ikigai would be a Japanese, but you're an Australian, you're a white man. Yeah. So
Yes.
tell us a bit about yourself and how you ended up being so passionate about Ikigai and then setting up not just a company, not just an institution, but a coaching program on Ikigai. So tell us a bit more.
Yes, so I agree. I'm probably the most unlikely person being, a white Australian talking about Ikigai, which is this, deep philosophical concept we could relate to positive psychology. But I have a very strong connection to Japan. I lived in Japan for 10 years. My wife is Japanese, and I seem to have an affinity with the people, and I just love the culture. And about 1998, I was casually introduced to Ikigai in a conversation, and I was amazed. There was this one word that would articulate, purpose and the reason why we battle on through life. And I was at the time in Japan and very inspired to learn Japanese. So it was one of these amazing words. And oddly, I didn't hear Ikigai very often after that, but I heard very relatable words, like the words we've gone through, like yarigai, like what's worth doing. And then, of course, 20 years after that, I began to see Ikigai on social media, on TED Talks, Netflix series, best-selling books.
Mm.
And I noticed that most or pretty much all of the content was factually wrong. And I thought someone should do something about this. Like, this is wrong.
Mm.
And initially I thought I can't because I don't really know what Ikigai is. And eventually I convinced myself, well, I could learn and I could start a podcast. And that began 5 years ago.
Mm.
So it's been this journey for me of uncovering what Ikigai is. And I discovered, like you, it's really interesting. To most Japanese, it's a word they don't really talk or think about that often. But
Mm.
as you know, Chris, there's this huge body growing of research on the
Mm.
subject.
Mm.
And I've always been interested in positive psychology and self-development. So it was, I don't know, it's like the perfect marriage for me to find Ikigai.
I remember you sharing with us when I was attending the program with you that you went to Japan to. Were you working as a digital marketer in Japan, or you were doing something else when you were there?
Yeah, I mean, originally I went as a trainee chef, and then I went back to teach English. And it was when I was teaching English that I was asked the word. And then eventually I started my own school. And then in Japan was where I found my entrepreneurial spirit. And then I
Right, right.
started my own school and started my own language products and then got into internet marketing.
So you were there to be a training chef. Was it to cook Japanese food or not?
Yeah, it was to cook Japanese food, I guess modern. So it was an izakaya,
Oh,
which maybe you'd know, and a lot of people would know. So it's almost like
Yeah.
tapas or pub food.
Right. Izakaya,
And
yes.
yeah, that was a year. So that was a great experience. That was in 1995, so a long time ago.
Wow. So do you still cook Japanese food today?
Um, Occasionally. I mean, it's pretty easy to put on steam rice and
Okay.
pull out some natto and cook some, I don't know, stuff like shogayaki, like uh, I guess you'd call that gingered pork or
Right,
whatever.
right,
Yeah. So
right.
occasionally.
So many people do not know that actually you know how to speak Japanese, you understand Japanese. And did you
Yes.
go for
Yeah.
formal lessons, or actually it's through all your conversations with your in-laws, with your wife, that you pick up Japanese along the way?
Yeah, I probably went the worst way. I went through very formalized lessons on grammar, and I was actually studying for something called the Japanese proficiency test. And I mean, eventually, once you live in Japan, you discover, oh, Japanese don't really speak as formal as we would assume so. And then even where my wife's from, it's not a dialect, but they do speak differently. They have
Right,
colloquialisms,
right,
different verb endings, and it's also a language you can't just pick up. So if you go to Japan and then you're teaching English and you're living with foreign friends, you won't pick the language up. You really got to study. But the best way I found was to just spend time with Japanese friends
right.
and engaging in conversation.
Do you think that in a way helped you to understand the whole cultural meaning, the concept of Ikigai much better?
Absolutely. I think you really need to. For me to teach it and understand it and be in a position where I'm teaching it was, yeah, I would
Right,
say I've learned so much from the culture and all these relatable concepts we discovered, like ibasho and this idea of, utori, which we I think ended up calling the space to have peace of mind. So
right,
that
right,
was something you contributed to. So yeah, I think you need to live it to some degree. But
right,
it is a concept we can all universally understand. But the Japanese have this unique lens on what makes life worth living. And it's not just about happiness. It's about overcoming adversity or expressing yourself or being true to your values and so on.
right. Yeah, I mean, I found that the fact that you are able to understand Japanese and speak Japanese, I think that was really helpful as a teacher for us because I listened to some of your podcasts, and for those of you out there, Nick has a podcast called Ikigai Tribe Podcast, and you actually interviewed some of the Japanese scholar. And I have to be honest with you, I struggle to understand their English, and sometimes they sort of like give up speaking English and they go to their Japanese. And if not for the fact that you translated it for us, we would have missed out a lot of this essence. So, if you are listening and you are very interested to learn more about Ikigai, do go and visit Nick's podcast. I think you can find it on Spotify. I'm sure you can find it on Apple Podcasts as well.
Yep. Yes. Yep.
Okay,
Thank you.
great. So through the program, Nick and I have been telling many people in Singapore and through my workshops and also through my own podcast, I've been telling people enthusiastically that the four-circle Venn diagram is not Ikigai, because just like you, every time I go out there and I say, "Have you heard of the word Ikigai?" People say, "Yeah, I've heard of it. It's the four-circle Venn diagram, isn't it?" And then I will be so enthusiastic because it's like I know something and they don't, and I'll tell them, "No, actually that's not the correct concept of Ikigai, right?" And I know that you have interviewed the person who put this four-circle Venn diagram on his book. I think it's a Spanish astrologer, Andrea Zuzunaga. Can you tell us a bit, because you've spoken to the man himself, can you share with everyone here a bit about how this four-circle Venn diagram came about?
Yes. So Andreas Zuzunaga was a lovely man, and he's an astrologer and a coach, among other things. And for him, it was his interpretation of purpose. So it was actually called proposito, so purpose. And I will say there have been other iterations of this Venn diagram by other people before and after his contribution. So it's very hard to, I think, pin it down to one person, but it was Andreas's version that eventually became known as the Ikigai Venn diagram. And he told me it basically came to him from his study of natal charts, star charts. And it was just one of those things he was reflecting, and it seemed to come to him. And it was just something he shared online. So it wasn't something he was coaching, but it did get published in a book, actually. So it might have had some influence on people who read that book,
I see.
but it certainly wasn't his life's work. It was this moment of inspiration that I guess he gave attention to, and then he
Right.
structured it in that four-circle Venn diagram.
So when he first published it, it was not in his own book, right? Where did he publish this four-circle Venn diagram?
I think he published it on Facebook, and then he was published in. Someone then asked permission to
I
publish it
see.
in their book. I can't remember off the top of my head
Right.
because because I don't really care about the Venn diagram.
Right.
But
I understand. Did that guy even credit the author? Did they credit it to Andreas?
yeah, yeah. So the original it was actually in a Spanish book originally.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the English book actually credits Mark Wynn, who I think we're going to talk about.
Right.
So yeah, but at that stage it was still called Proposito
Right.
in the Spanish book. Yeah.
Right. So Andres never intended that to be an Ikigai Venn diagram. For him, it was more his reflection, and it was more, I guess it would be more accurate to say that it was a purpose Venn diagram, how he saw purpose. For those of you who don't know what we are talking about, unfortunately, just go and Google Ikigai and you will see the four-circle Venn diagram. But this time around, when you see it and you are hearing this, please know that that is not Andrea's intention. He simply put it out as a Venn diagram, and right in the center of the Venn diagram, it is purpose, right? And it was this gentleman by the name of Mark Wins. He actually replaced the word purpose and put it Ikigai, and then it became famous. So you interviewed the man himself. Can you please tell us, I mean, why did he do that? I mean, did he go out there purposely to cheat the world, and to make people totally confused? And how did he even influence the world with that change? Because it was him who made the four-circle Venn diagram famous, not Andreas. I mean,
Yeah.
I've never heard of him before, right? So you've spoken to the man himself. Why did he do that?
Yeah, Mark is a fun guy. He's an inspiring guy. And for him, it was, again, like just a moment of inspiration. So he had watched a TED talk by Dan Buettner, who is a National Geographic fellow. And I mean, this TED talk's now, I think it's 18 years old. And in the talk, Dan talks about the 5 blue zones. And of course,
Right.
he mentions Okinawa as one of those blue zones, which actually now is no longer a blue zone. It's become Japan's least healthy prefecture. But
That's right.
anyway, it's a side note.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know, 14 years ago or 10 years ago, Mark watched this TED Talk and was inspired by this word Ikigai that Dan briefly mentioned in his TED Talk when he talked about the lifestyles of this particular group of elderly Okinawans. And for some reason, he thought, oh, wouldn't it be cool to take the purpose Venn diagram and replace the word purpose with Ikigai? And for him, it was just this playful idea. It took him less than 40 minutes. He quickly wrote a blog post, made a graphic, and it was more just for him to share with his network. He didn't even post it on social media. It was just a blog post. And then, I don't know, I think 6 months or a year later, it got picked up somehow. And then, I guess through social media, it went viral. And the reason why I think it's very seductive, it's like if you sort of thought about it on face value, if you're doing something you love, that you're good at, that the world needs, and you're getting paid for it, you'd think, oh, that's my dream job, or that's perfect.
Yep.
But as you know, Chris, life isn't that easy, and we also need to grow and be challenged. So it was really nothing more than that. Mark just thought, oh, wouldn't it be cool to replace purpose with Ikigai simply because he was inspired. His intentions were more just playful and good. And he really had, no idea about the Japanese concept
Mm.
of Ikigai. Um, but in many ways, I thank him for that because usually people stumble upon the Venn diagram and then when they search deeper, they find me. So it's sort of been quite helpful for my, I guess, for my journey.
Yeah, but when did he realize, or did he actually realize that that was wrong? Or he only realized it when you decided to do an interview with him? What happened?
I'm not 100% sure, but I did send him an email saying, "Hey, Mark, how you going? You've influenced thousands of people with this Venn diagram, and I'm sort of here to challenge you on it. Would you be up for a sort of an open but challenging conversation?" And he said yes. So I really admire him for him being open. And then, if you listen to the episode, he's just this fun, playful guy who it was sort of 40 minutes of his time. So I really respect him for that. And I think even though it's not accurate, it's not Ikigai, he still probably has had a positive influence on
Yeah,
thousands of people. So
yeah,
there's something to take away from it. And there's many things to take away from it.
yeah,
But his intentions were always good. And I
yeah,
really admire him coming onto
yeah,
my podcast to sort
yeah.
of openly talk about it.
Hi listener, we hope you're enjoying this episode and podcast series so far. At Providend, we have been sharing our thought leadership content through various mediums beyond just this podcast. If you're interested in knowing more, check out the link in the show note to subscribe to our newsletter today. Thank you, and let's get back to the episode.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, even in our class, we talk about it. I mean, it's still a useful framework to think about life, but it is just not Ikigai. And did he, after that conversation with you, I don't know, I mean, you may not know, but did he put on his post that, hey, guy, I talked to Nick Kemp and I realized that it was a mistake. It's really not Ikigai. Did he clarify it?
Actually, no, I've just remembered he did write a follow-up post saying basically some years ago I wrote a blog post on the concept of Ikigai, tying it to purpose, tying it to a Venn diagram. And he basically said I had no idea this would become a meme that would change the world. So he actually knew before I contacted him. I just remembered that now. But even, he's very what's the word to describe Mark? So he's quite playfully blunt. He's like, this has influenced you, Nick, and now you're doing this work. So to some degree, the Venn diagrams made you even more passionate about Ikigai, and it's influenced all these other people. And so he's almost philosophical and sort of saying maybe it was meant to happen. Like,
Okay.
I don't, he doesn't know why it popped into his head to merge the two concepts. So that's the kind of guy he is. And I think even after the call, he was still quite blasé and carefree. For him, it's not a big thing because all these people said, "Oh, Mark, you should write a book or you should do something with this." And he said, "Well, no, it's not really my thing. It was just an idea I shared with the world, 10, 12 years ago."
Yeah.
And nothing more than that for him personally. So that's kind of the irony and kind of the inspiration. Like, he just had this little moment of creativity, and he describes it as almost the ease of it is what's inspiring. Like, it was no more than 40 minutes, and it's had this incredible impact. And he's done nothing more, on the concept.
Yeah. It's quite amazing.
And that's kind of the guy he is. He's always moving forward and doing different things. So
Yeah. But in a way, it's true that because the Four-Circle Venn diagram is still there, there are so many books. I've been trying to buy books after reading your book and after reading other people's book on Ikigai. I've been trying to buy a good book on Ikigai, and it's so difficult to find the correct version, right? Because most of it is about the Four-Circle Venn diagram. I mean, it just goes to show how influential that Four-Circle Venn diagram is. And in a way, it's true that because it's so influential, it's still out there. Many people that I talk to still refer to that four-circle Venn diagram, that it causes us to be a lot more passionate to go out there and say, hey guys, this is wrong. It makes us almost like very evangelistic about it. Yeah, but I wanted to hear from you. I've been saying it, but nothing beats hearing from your own mouth, right? I mean, because you understand Japanese. Why is that four-circle Venn diagram not Japanese? And in fact, it is quite insulting to the Japanese, because I know one thing that you said, the Japanese look at Ikigai as something that they do on a daily basis, and they don't have to be paid for it, right? To say that, for it to be Ikigai, you got to be paid for it is actually an insult to the Japanese. So can you tell us a little bit more about that? I mean, why would the Japanese feel in a way upset with the four-circle Venn diagram being labeled as Ikigai?
Yeah, so I think for Japanese, initially they're quite surprised. Like, people know this word. Like, oh, you know this word. And then if you show them the Venn diagram, they're either taken aback or confused. And then I've had Japanese friends say, like, oh, the money aspect of it made me feel really uneasy. One of my good friends, he attended a tech conference, and one of the presenters, introduced the Venn diagram as Ikigai. And he was confused and then was like, oh, the money part's wrong. Like, this made him feel really uneasy. And he wanted to contact the person who did the presentation, but he even felt uneasy about that. So it just sort of left this bad taste in his mouth. Another Japanese friend told me how, yeah, you've taken this beautiful Japanese concept and you've put it into this little box, and it's so much more than making money from something that you're good at. So yeah, there've been mixed reactions. I mean, even some Japanese, ironically, some are kind of get inspired by it. So that's odd. But then you have other people saying, oh no, this is wrong, this should not happen. Because for most people in Japan, Ikigai is aligned with their values. It's something usually often personal. It's something that they might keep private, and it helps them get through life. So to suggest it has to be something you need to be paid for, yeah, they won't like that. And then often Ikigai is tied to learning and growth. So you don't have to be good at it. And Ikigai is something you usually do for yourself. Now, that can include service to other people, but you do it for yourself because that's what makes your life feel worth living, something you do for yourself to make life feel worth living. So it is a bit of a, I guess I call it cultural appropriation here. Unintentionally, foreigners, redefine Ikigai into a dream job.
Yeah.
And it's so much more than that. It's more relatable to, it's both philosophical, we can deep reflecting on the meaning of life, but it's also very psychological, as in what makes life worth living.
Yeah. So I mean, I've been, after getting to know the real meaning of Ikigai, thanks to you and the program, I've had a chance to actually share with people what Ikigai is all about. And when people know what Ikigai is all about, they find it very encouraging because they find it very reachable, right? Because the Western way of looking at purpose of life sometimes is so big that it's unreachable. And when it's unreachable, it's very discouraging because it seems like living a purposeful life is only reserved for the few. But with the Japanese concept of Ikigai, it's very encouraging because all of us, in all walks of life, we all can have Ikigai. And you have spoken to many scholars, whether they are non-Japanese and all the Japanese ones. Maybe it's good. I mean, I have done it before, but I probably cannot do half as good a job as you. Maybe you can explain to everybody this whole Japanese concept of Ikigai. What actually is Ikigai?
Yeah, it's always interesting to think about, how do I answer this question today? because I've always had this opportunity to answer it in so many ways, because we know Ikigai is this multi-dimensional, multifaceted concept. And I always love to go back to Gordon Matthews, who has a great quote saying, Ikigai is the answer to the question of what makes life worth living. And so if you ask someone, what makes your life worth living, or what makes your life feel worth living, depending on the person, you'll get a variety of answers. So I have the belief it's really strongly tied to your social world. So it includes relationships, roles, just helping people, being helped by people. But it could be also, for some people, tied to their religion or their hobbies or their work. So it's not just one thing. It can be, hopefully, as Ken Moggy talks about, hopefully it is a spectrum. But it can include these small joys. It can include social interaction like, we're doing now. Having meaningful discussion. It can include new experiences. So as you know, I just held a retreat in Japan. So that was a new experience for me. I had all these challenges and I had all these fears, but at the same time, it was a success. And I had this amazing interaction with 6 other people. I had a Japanese friend help me. And that was a once in a lifetime experience. And every day was like a once in a lifetime experience. And it's changed me. So Ikigai also gives you the opportunity to be the person you want to be. And it can be tied to, ambitious goals. I guess the focus is on you being authentic and creative rather than success focused. So Ikigai is more about intrinsic motivation rather than, external motivation.
Yeah. So, for me, I always remember that Ikigai is made out of 2 words, right? Iki
Yes.
and Gai. And the word Iki, and being Chinese, is easy for me to understand this because, in Chinese, one word can have multiple meanings, right? And in Iki, in Japanese, it can be one's lifetime or it can be daily meaning, right? And Ikigai skewed more towards daily living, right?
Yes.
And Gai, I remember, you taught us that Gai in Japanese can be something that is of value, can be something that is worthy. And the word Gai also explained the armor, that the people go to war, they wear. And I remember that. This becomes very valuable because when you go to war, right? The armor is something that's of worth because it protects you. The word Ikigai means you do something in your daily life that is worth your time, that is of value, that is of meaning. And I find that very profound because I've always thought that the purpose in life is that one big purpose. And I have to get there. If I don't get there, I'm not living a purposeful life. But the word Ikigai really changed that. And it's very encouraging because, like you mentioned, these are things that I do on a daily basis. And they don't have to be big things. They can be small joys. They can be conversations like this. This is a recorded podcast, yes. But if we take away the recording and we are just 2 human beings enjoying ourselves, talking to each other, right? It can be drinking a glass of wine. It can be with your ibasho, right? A safe place for you to be at. It could be a physical place, could be people that you trust and they don't judge you. And these are very doable things. And when we realize what Ikigai is all about, we realize that we have it every day. It's not something that that's unreachable, right? And I want to ask you this question because when I was sharing this with a friend, and he said that, well, actually, in many ways, Ikigai is linked to mindfulness, right? And I know you have gone through some training in mindfulness. I have not, but I know that mindfulness, a part of mindfulness is about living in the present moment. It's about appreciating the present moment. And in many ways, Ikigai is like that, right? Small joys in life, realizing that, yes, this is the moment that I can be grateful for. Wow, this is my Ikigai. It's so meaningful, right? So maybe you can talk a little bit and unpack a little bit more. How is Ikigai linked with mindfulness?
Yeah, there's a few things to say on this. So I'd like to refer to Ken Moggy, who's a neuroscientist, and he wrote his own book called The Little Book of Ikigai. He talks, I mean, he's a big believer in this idea of small joys, and he talks about sensory pleasure. And so he has 5 pillars of Ikigai, 2 of which are the joy of little things and being in the here and now. So I think being in the here and now is it's a more helpful way to probably describe mindfulness. So when we're fully immersed in a conversation like we are now, or eating a meal, or being in nature, and we don't have our phone, when we're not distracted, we really can have these moments of joy or even awe. Like you go out in nature and you see a waterfall, or you see some animals interact, or you see a beautiful flower. For that moment, it's like, wow, the world seems to stop, and you have this interaction with Mother Nature, or God, or however you want to frame it. So I think that's one way to look at it, sensory pleasure. The other way to look at it is we need to be reflective and think about what matters to me, what makes my life feel worth living. Where do I want to move? What do I want to move towards, or who do I care about? Who is my Ikigai? If we're distracted, if we're always consuming entertainment, it's very hard for us to mindfully think on what matters to us.
It's true.
And then, I mean, going back to what you said about gai, meaning, armor or even shell, some Japanese will say Ikigai is like a coping mechanism or like a safety charm. And this is where it gets really interesting, because you could even have an unhealthy Ikigai, like drinking or smoking, which obviously I wouldn't recommend. But if it helps you get through the day, some Japanese will say, oh, yeah, that's my Ikigai, because I'm so stressed with work. I go home, and then when I take that first sip of beer, I can relax and just let go of the stress. So this is why it's, fascinating. Sometimes I think it's easy to define, but then other times I think, wow, it's so multidimensional. It's, hard to define, but it's both proactive and reflective. So we need to do something to activate our Ikigai, but we also need to be mindful and reflective on who matters to us, what matters to me, and how can I integrate that into my daily life? Because it's not a goal to achieve. It's almost like a guide for life, and you can find it in the small as well as the ambitious goals we pursue.
Hi listener, we hope you've been enjoying this episode and the podcast series so far. If this podcast has been beneficial to you, please give us a rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or your favorite podcast platform. And if you're watching this on YouTube, do like this video and subscribe to not miss our future episodes. Thank you, and let's get back to the episode.
Right. Yeah, I think whatever you have said is a nice segue to what I wanted to ask you. Because at Providend, and I've shared this with you before, although we are a wealth advisory, wealth management firm, we always believe that what is more important for us to do when we engage our clients is how do we help them first make life decisions before financial decisions? Because the way we look at money at Providend is that money is not a goal. Money is an enabler. Right? I mean, if we chase after money like a goal, it's like what Stephen Covey said, you're leaning your ladder on the wrong wall. By the time you climb up that ladder, you realize that you're on the wrong building, right? So at work, what we try to do for our clients is to help them first make life decisions. And life decisions, now I have a word for it, thanks to you, that life decisions, they are actually Ikigai decisions. And once our clients know their Ikigai decisions, we arrange their financial affairs to support that, to make sure that they can live their Ikigai decisions. So I know we've spoken quite a bit about it, and throughout this entire podcast, you have peppered it with some ways on how people can discover their Ikigai. But perhaps if I were to ask you to summarize, like, the listeners today, after they go away from this podcast, what can they do to start their first step into discovering their Ikigai? What can they do as a first step? I know it's complicated, right? But what is at least that first step they can do?
Sure. So, I mean, first of all, I want to say your idea or your term of Ikigai decisions, yeah, that really resonated with me, because we do have these opportunities every day to decide what to do, either today or for the future. And as you know, Ikigai also is this feeling that your life is moving forward, and it is felt partially in the pursuit of life-defining goals or meaningful goals, but it's also found again in the present. And I mean, we can even have Ikigai habits. So a good way to start might be to think about what can you do for yourself every day that's easy, that you enjoy. So for me, it might be listening to my favorite music. It might be my coffee in the morning. It might be exercise. It's finding something to do that makes you feel that life is worth living. But I also think it's very much tied to relationship. And all of us have been helped by others throughout our life. So I think one way to feel Ikigai is to think about someone who's helped you, and then express gratitude to them, or do something for others. So there are plenty of Ikigai opportunities, and we can make these Ikigai decisions to take a break, enjoy something, fully immerse ourselves in it, or help someone, express gratitude to someone, hug someone. Or right now you can think about, where's my life headed? What do I want to do? And hopefully you have this sense that your life is moving forward. So rather than, as you said, rather than worry about money and figures, like I want $1 million. If I said I want $1 million, I guess you could say, well, do you want US dollars? You want Australian dollars? Do you want Singaporean dollars? It's such a stupid idea. But if you said, well, I want a lifestyle where I have the opportunity to help others, or travel, or study, or learn a new hobby, then you have this, you have a plan now to work towards, and then you start to take action towards that. And once you start taking action, that's when you feel Ikigai, because as Ken says, Ikigai is proactive. Once you start to take action, you feel it, and it is something you feel. So that's probably why I always go back to this idea of it's tied to your social world. And you can always catch up with a friend, call your children, call your parents, help your neighbor, or just thank someone.
Yeah, so
many ways.
I remember you always said that Ikigai is not a destination, it is a journey. And it is the feeling that you get when you embark on that journey. And the Japanese word for it is Ikigai-kan, right? And kan, actually, the Japanese kanji is related to Chinese. In Chinese is kanjue, which is the feeling, right? The feeling of Ikigai. So yeah, as you embark, when you take that first step into doing something that is meaningful, even if you never get to the destination, you never become as good as you hope you would be. But that whole journey, the enjoyment, that feeling of doing something meaningful is really what Ikigai is more about, rather than the destination. I can't help but see the word behind 字, right? It's a Chinese word, or I think to you it's Japanese kanji, it's called 字. Japanese kokurazashi, that's 字, right? So it's a big word. I can't help, because I remember that kokurazashi 字, right? It's one source of Ikigai, and I'm asking you this because there are some people who has that one big purpose in life, and Ikigai includes that, right? I mean, Ikigai is not just about the small joys in life, but Ikigai allows the inclusion of that one single big purpose in life, which is 智 or kokurazashi. Am I right to say that? Yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, if we think about our life over time, we age, and then things in our life, the things we care about in our life change. And so when we're children, like children are great at Ikigai because they're intrinsically motivated to play. So they'll happily play in mud and with their toys, and they don't have all the worries we have as a parent or an adult. And then, as we get older, we probably get into our hobbies, and then maybe we have our first, relationship, and we fall in love, and then we decide what we're going to study, and then we get married and we have kids. And so over time your Ikigai changes. But for some people, at a certain stage of their life, they might have this ambition to make a change, and it's more about this ambition to make a positive change rather than achieve a certain amount of wealth or whatever. And as you said, wealth is an enabler, so that's okay to make money. It's probably what you do with it or how you spend it that is going to make you feel that it's worth having. But I mean, I guess my kokorozashi at the moment was a retreat, to do the retreat in Japan, and I guess I achieved that, but it doesn't mean I'm going to stop. It means, this is validating my Ikigai. Like, it was worth doing. I connected to people, and I want to do it again. So it's something I'll continue, and then over time, that'll probably change. And not everyone has to have a kokorozashi because it's quite ambitious. There are other people who have this happy-go-lucky attitude, and they just want to enjoy life and enjoy their friendships, and they don't have to be driven by a highly ambitious goal. So I think it's dependable on personality, where you're at in life. And then as we get older, I guess we get more reflective, and we find, I think maybe with life wisdom, we find purpose in smaller things or in relationships, and we're not, super success driven.
Yeah, so I mean, for those of you listening out there, I hope this is encouraging for you, because I mean, Ikigai is not just for those of us who have only one single purpose, or rather, I would say that for those of us who has really this one big purpose, and then now you realize that Ikigai includes other things. I hope you're not discouraged, because Ikigai is such wide spectrum. It includes some of us here who has got that kokurazashi, right? That 志气, in Chinese called 志气, right? So if you have that one single purpose, Ikigai is big enough to include you, right? But if you're listening to this and you say that, no, I don't think I have that one single big purpose in life, but I do have many, many seemingly small things that I feel is meaningful. You have Ikigai. Ikigai can, you are included in this whole concept of Ikigai itself. So it's very inclusive. So thanks very much, Nick. And please tell us, I mean, I've learned so much from you through the coaching program that I've gone through with you. But you have some other programs. Maybe you can tell us some of the programs that you are offering right now for people who wants to find out more about Ikigai.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, I mean, this is a good way to also mention role as a source of Ikigai. So I guess my role is to share with non-Japanese an evidence-based, respectful, multi-angled take on Ikigai. And as you know, I do my podcast interviews, I find research papers, and so I offer a coaching certification program that's 8 weeks long that you took, that explores Ikigai and relatable concepts that we've touched on, like kokorozashi or ibasho. And I mean, that's really changed my life, and it seemed to have an impact on other people. And then I'm always inspired by people such as yourself who actually take this knowledge and then share it with others, but also you've come up with your own ideas, like, Ikigai decisions. So that's always inspiring. So that sort of becomes my Ikigai. It's like, oh, wow, Chris has done something with this. He's doing all these successful presentations and public speaking and all this opportunity. So I sometimes have to pinch myself and think, wow, what am I doing? What am I doing? People I would normally never have any connection to. I have this amazing connection through Ikigai, through Japanese culture. And then most recently, as I mentioned, I've started doing retreats where we get to see Ikigai come to life in Japan, but also experience it ourselves. Because as you know, Chris, if we actually refer to the Ikigai 9, one way to experience Ikigai is to start something new or try something new. And that's what usually happens on my retreat. So, yeah, I hope to be doing retreats in Japan regularly. They're a 1 week retreat with everything included, meals, activities, domestic transport. And that's become a new source of Ikigai for me. And I also have I have a book and a course, but just going to my website, ikigaitribe.com, you'll get a taste, and you could always just listen to my podcasts.
Yeah, so Nick has a wonderful resource. So I'll just repeat what Nick has said. So Nick runs a really serious 8 weeks program. If you want to be like me, who have gone through that program, so that's an 8 weeks program. He runs a retreat from time to time. It takes people to Japan. I mean, that's where the word Ikigai came from. So that's the retreat. And then the third thing, of course, you can go to his website. You can listen to his podcast. It's an Ikigai Tribe podcast. And also he has a book. It's the book that even though I've gone through the course, I've bought the book. I've read through the book. I have bought my clients the book. I have referred people to buy this book because trust me, if you want to find a book that talks about the real meaning of Ikigai, it's very difficult to find many books out there. Nick's book is one of them, right? Nicholas Kemp, that's the full name, Nicholas Kemp, Ikigai Kan, Ikigai-Kan, K-A-N, right? The other book I know is Ken Mogi's book, yeah, but definitely read Nick's book, because I think what Nick has done is that Nick has put together in the book different research from different scholars. Of course, I think a part of it came from the mother of Ikigai, Mieko Kamiya. And then, of course, he added in other things that he has learned from other scholars. So this is like a book that it's very hard, really, to find an English book that put together all the different concepts of Ikigai together. I will tell you that, and I hope Nick doesn't mind me saying that, because it's not an easy book to read. It's not a book whereby you read, you feel that you are motivated for that moment, and then after you finish the book, you ask yourself actually what you have taken away. You feel like, oh, it's just feelings. But Nick's book is hard to read because it requires you to reflect. There's some deep stuff inside there. I can't read it in one sitting, right? I took a while to read it. Yeah, but it is probably the best book that I've ever read on Ikigai. So do buy that book. It's on Amazon. You can buy it off Amazon. Yeah, so thank you very much, Nick, for spending time with me and for answering all my questions, and especially that part on why the four-circle Venn diagram of Ikigai is not the correct concept, at least not the Japanese concept of Ikigai. And again, the website is Ikigai Tribe, right? Tribe as in tribe.com, ikigaitribe.com. I'm sure we are going to put it down below our show notes so you can refer to it. But otherwise, thank you so much, Nick, once again. I'm going to let you go because I think now it's almost 5 o'clock. Is it 5 o'clock now in Melbourne, or is it 6 o'clock in Melbourne?
It's 6, but that's okay.
Okay.
No, Chris, thank you. And also, I appreciate what you mentioned. Yeah, so I should mention my book, Ikigai Kan, was inspired by Mieko Kamiya, who I like to think of as the mother of Ikigai. And yeah, she really has a very easy way to understand Ikigai. You have Ikigai sources, hobbies, people, goals, dreams, even memories. And then you have Ikigai Kan, which is the feeling. So the feelings associated. And it was, very much her work that inspired me as well. So
Yeah.
it's a good way for us to, and we're saying a shout out to the mother of Ikigai.
Yeah,
Mieko
and
Kamiya.
really, without reading the book, you would not have been able to glean into the world of Mieko Kamiya, because her book is not published in English; it's in Japanese. Her thesis was not published, and so by reading Nick's book, you really is reading into the thinking of the mother of Ikigai in English. So for those of us who are English speaking, you can understand the thinking by the mother of Ikigai. So thank you so much, Nick, for spending time, and thank you so much for joining us for this Money Wisdom podcast. If you like our podcast, please subscribe to it. Please share with your friends. So thank you, Nick, and
Thanks, Chris.
have a good evening. Thank you.
All analysis, views or opinions from interviews, recommendations and other information broadcasted, podcasted or published herein are provided for general information purposes only. Information expressed does not take into account any specific situation, particular needs or objectives, and should not be construed as specific advice or a recommendation. Information has been obtained from sources that are deemed to be reliable, but their accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed. Always consult with a qualified investment, legal or tax professional before taking any action. Providend Limited does not accept any liability for any loss whatsoever arising from any use of the information broadcasted or published herein. All contents and information contained herein may not be copied or reproduced in whole or in part by any means without prior written consent of Providend Limited.